Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Grandmaster Chess Speedrun. This time, inching in on 2100, we're going to see how we face up against a 2100 ELO opponent ourselves, and I'm going to opt for the classical Sicilian. This one has been requested for a little while now, but we haven't been able to get it, and finally, we see an open Sicilian. I swear, people are playing the Alapin all the time. You'll get Rossalimo if you go knight c6. No one seems like they want the open, but here it comes. I'm going to go knight to f6, targeting this pawn in the center, trying to attract the knight out. And now I'm going knight c6. This is the classical Sicilian. Now, my knowledge in this opening, not amazing, but as far as I know, you can play this with like e6, bishop e7 castles, and control d5. Or maybe you can play it with like e5, knight jumps over, a6, and do something like this. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to go and give the e5 variation a go. This is kind of more in the style of a Najdorf or a Sveshnikov Sicilian. Given that we're going to get a6 in the position like this, knight's going to hop back over here because even that this knight's already developed. And I'm just going to continue with a bishop up to the e6 square. The reason I'm playing this move is we're supporting this d5 pawn push in the future. And I'm just going to go bishop e7 castles. Potentially, you can also play some g6 ideas as well. But I'm not too concerned about bishop to c4, I don't think. I can just continue like bishop e7, take this way, and the d5 and f5 squares will be under my control, which is definitely quite nice. Some alternative, maybe I can play b5, but it feels a little bit loose, a little bit unnecessary, so I'm just going to continue development with bishop to e7 here. And you should not be afraid of this trade when you're playing these Sicilian structures, because you'll notice the big downside of my Sicilian is that I've pushed my pawn up to e5, and I have no c-pawn to go to c6, which means that the d5 square is a big hole. But if my opponent is to capture this bishop here on e6, then the pawn will retake on e6, and all of a sudden my holes are all filled, and I am feeling very, very good. Okay, so he goes knight c4, targeting this pawn here, but I don't see why I wouldn't just play b5 and kick you right out immediately, given that you cannot take any of these guys, and knight b6, your knight might just wander in too deep into the forest and simply get trapped with rook b8. So b5, let's play it immediately, and I'm just going to continue developing, probably with rook c8 next, although maybe we can also continue with some d5 move, not 100% sure. Also nice is they can't go back to this square because they get hit with a fork. So he goes back to this passive square on d2, but this is just screaming to get punished. Let's launch forward with pawn to d5. This is your golden move in a Sicilian. If you can break with d5, you're normally doing pretty well. As far as I can see, with threatening d4 with a fork, we've untangled both of the center pawns now. And only black can be better here. Alrighty, bishop has come out to g5, and I'm liking the look of b4 quite a bit in this position, trying to kick the knight back to a more passive square or send it to the edge of the board, where it will no longer be pressuring our center, where our opponent is looking to undermine our knight on f6. So I'm a big fan of b4. Let's play pawn b4 before we address this bishop over here. And black is really, really starting to take over the initiative at this point. Okay, knight heads back to e2. Our opponent has both their knights on these passive squares, which is not ideal for them. I'm now going to ask this bishop what exactly it's doing. And if our opponent wants to recapture them, we'll be able to play e4 in the future. And given that our b pawn is here, pressuring here and here, it's going to be quite hard for them to defend this b pawn, especially if they play a pawn to c3. We'll already have a bishop ready to target that pawn on f6. So everything seems to have gone pretty well. We've exited the opening. Our opponent decided not to capture our knight on f6. And now comes the point in the game where we have to really try and come up with a plan. I think a couple plans here. There's shoving this pawn forward, trying to improve the knight. Also, rook c8, very natural, very nice improving move. I like rook c8 a lot. If they go knight b3, we can play a5. I see no real problem there. Yeah, let's just go. Let's play rook c8, improving move for now. Target this pawn over here on c2, which our b pawn is kind of restricting quite nicely. And we'll see what our opponent comes up with. Also on knight b3, maybe we can start playing like here and here. But I don't think this one makes a lot of sense for the opponent, because now we can capture here, and either we create a weak pawn, or they give us more targets to take space in the center, although I would give them the e4 square. So I'm probably not going to do that, and instead I'm going to plant my knight in the center of the board like this. So opponent tries to target my pawn now in the center. I think I should probably just protect it. Maybe I can also play a knight to f5 here as well, though. Knight f5 looks pretty good. Attacking this loose bishop. If they capture my knight, I take back with bishop, and I protect this one over here. Seems pretty decent. Yeah, let's go and target this bishop over here. See what they have for us. They could sack the bishop. Seems very risky, though. Doesn't seem all that good. They decide to capture, allowing us to protect this pawn in the center. And now queen comes out to c4. Our opponent is doing a very good job here. They're applying some pressure. I think we should still be in good shape, though, especially considering we have this tactic here with knight to d4. Because then if our opponent captures, we'll be able to play knight c2 with a nice fork over here. So this seems like a very, very decent improvement that we can play. They go for the exchange. We give them the fork. And we're going to have to try and win this ending with a rook versus a knight and a pawn. This shouldn't be too bad, though, because our rook will have easy access to the c2 square quite quickly. So we're going to capture this rook here. And this move, do we play it right away? I'm not 100%. Not 100%. I think maybe it would be prudent to play this move first, and after this knight jump, play king f7, because we'll always have the infiltration spot on c2, and if we rush it a little bit, maybe they can get some knight d6 counterplay. But at the same time, immediate rook c2, king knight goes to e4, king f7, check, king e6. Do they actually have anything here, or is it just ghosts? I think it's just ghosts when you look at it concretely. So let's actually play rook c2. And now that I think about it a little bit more, even after the knight goes here, I don't actually have to address this at all, because the pawn is already protected by the rook on f6. So let's just start capturing pawns over here. All right, they, I guess, are going to go for knight to c5. So let's play a little finesse here. Let's play rook c2 and then rook c4 first, so that they cannot get their knight to c5, which would attack our pawn and defend theirs at the same time. As far as I can tell, that's also just a free pawn, by the way. I mean, a pawn is a pawn, and I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say no. I'm going to take it. Call me greedy, but that pawn gives me extra play that I'll be able to use. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking maybe I go for immediate f5 here. I'm seeing a trick for white. If I go rook c4, they play this. I play f5, they play knight f6. Very tricky move that might let them back in the game. So I'm going to play immediate pawn to f5, trying to force their knight over here, something like knight d6. And then I will have rook to f6. If they put the knight here, I will have rook to e6, and their pony is in a bit of a jam there. The knight is trapped on the e8 square. So that looks very, very good. And in fact, the only move for them I can see would be moving this rook over here. And the knight still looks very, very trapped, especially after I continue with something like rook c6. The knight has to go to e8 anyway. I bring my rook over. Yeah, their pony is getting in big trouble here. You can see this is the problem of the knights. They are quite easy to segregate off all the escape squares if you keep an eye out for it. Maybe they can go knight b7. That's a move I didn't quite consider, but looks very passive, and I don't think it's a good way forward. They just throw in the towel and resign the game. If knight b7, I would have rook b6 as far as I can see, and after the knight moves somewhere back, I can piggy up on the second rank, and that would be a simple checkmate. And if you capture my pawn, I'll hoover up all your pawns and go back, force off a rook trade. This will be an easy conversion. I'll show you a bit in the analysis board how that might have gone, and I'll be back with you in a few seconds. Alright, you guys, I'm pretty happy with the instructive value of that game. You got pretty much everything you wanted with a Sicilian with that pawn d5 push, counterplay on the queen side, and all of that good stuff. We did play that one at a 93 accuracy. Our opponent played an 83.8 for those of you who are interested. But let's just get into the main game. This is the classical Sicilian. Like I said, don't know it particularly well. I know that you can play either e6 or e5, so you can play it like a Scheveningen or Scheveningen, or you can play it with e5. e5 I'm slightly more familiar with than pawn e6, so I went for this one. They went for knight to b5, and it's a good idea to try and kick this knight out before it becomes too much of a problem for you, especially if white can get in like bishop g5, take it, knight d5, they can get big pressure on the c7 square quite quickly. So I kick it out, play bishop e6, which, mind you, Engine already is not very impressed for some reason. What would have been the move here? Apparently rook b8. I think I've seen a Hikaru game actually that went like this, but I did not remember that at all. b5's also playable, but it does looks a little bit loose, but it is the main move apparently. Bishop e6 also not bad. It is in the master's database. They went bishop c4. I went bishop e7 here. Another mistake. b5 is now a very good move because it can try and force this exchange, which is a beneficial exchange for black. And that's quite nice. Yeah, they wouldn't have had this knight regrouping here, and they'd have to go via knight b1 to d2, which is a big waste of time. So I should have lashed out earlier with b5. I was a bit hesitant to play this kind of move before I've castled, as this knight I was concerned might fall into some tactics, but looking at it more concretely, this b5 move would have been a very good idea. But I played a little bit too slow. Also, there's this knight e4 tactic, by the way, which is pretty cool, where you can go knight c3, bishop f7, takes, and d5 with a nice advantage for black. That's very thematic and a nice move for a Sicilian player to know. But I'm not super familiar with these openings. Like I said, I'm an accelerated dragon player mostly, although this is quite thematic. But I continue with bishop e7, bit of a lazy move. They castle, I castle as well. Takes, and now we get exactly what we wanted really from this opening. Like I said, this pawn on e6 is very strong, controls key squares here and here, and additionally, if white ever tries to play for f4, then we'll already have these center pawns here and the rook opened up, so this would be great, not to mention tactical details like this, which just win the game on the spot. So they continue with knight c4, I play b5, kicking them away, and in comes this pawn d5 expansion, and we've fully broken free now as the Sicilian player. Very happy to get the move d5 on the board. Slightly better is h6, which is quite interesting, saying this bishop is poorly placed, and actually this move is coming all the same, although I think they would just play f3 and then d5, probably something with bishop f2, but the engine does think that this is very good for black. So I guess that was probably a better way to take it. But we end up with this position. b4, small inaccuracy. Engine likes queen d6. Queen d6, I guess the point is that I'm ready to support my center pawns with the rooks. This does make a good amount of sense. b4 maybe a tiny bit rushed. h6 is good. This is all fine. And maybe this is a bit rushed as well. I think queen d6 could have been the way to go. Takes. Oh, wow. Nice tactic there. Glad I didn't blunder that one. E4 is a move that we were considering to go knight e5 and knight d3. I was just a bit concerned that it makes my pawns less flexible and potentially more vulnerable as you push them forward. That's kind of the risk with these center pawns. But I guess if it's good concretely and we get the knight to d3 very quickly, that would have been nice. Knight f5, basically the only move to hold all the pawns. They go queen to b3, and this is a big blunder on account of knight d4, which simply goes after this forking square on c2. I think our opponent missed that, and they should have gone queen d1, but this is now very, very awkward, especially given our bishop opens up here, and you have to ask, why would someone play queen b3 and queen d1? It's kind of like admitting defeat, which is extremely difficult to do as a chess player, to say, okay, I take it back, my move was actually really bad, and I'm going to try and be objective and stay in the present, and I'll just admit my mistake. But opponent couldn't do that. They even paused for a little bit. I think they realized it was a mistake, but they went for it anyway. Allow me the fork. I take the rook, and from here it's pretty smooth sailing. Queen rook c2, not seeing any ghosts there, and we start gobbling the pawns. Rook c2, again, I think is quite a nice finesse. If we went rook b4, they might have had knight to c5, although this move probably just wins on the spot as well. Now that I look at it, the knight would have been trapped in the corner. But taking it slow and steady here, opponent gives us a pawn. We're not afraid to take that free guy. They go after the pawn. f5, kicking the knight around, and once again the knight gets extremely close to being trapped here. Knight b7, rook would have gone to b6 like this. If they go here, I would have double stacked up here, and they are pretty much getting mated. Something like here, takes, here, rook g2, king here, and rook a2. Looks like they're getting mated almost. Maybe this, here, and actually attacking the knight is probably even stronger. Something like this would have happened. Our opponent would have had to throw in the towel because we would be threatening the knight and also threatening a checkmate. After they go back to defend, for example, this is even one other brutal way that the game could be finished. So, pretty nasty win in a Sicilian. Shows that this opening super dynamic. If you can execute your d5 move, get that big center, gain control, then that's how it works. You coil up like a snake and then you strike back when your opponent lets you in the game. So hopefully you got to see the key themes of this Sicilian defense. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you do like my style of teaching, you might be interested in some coaching. I've only got a few spots left now, but you can check the link in the description, send me an email, and I might take you on for some lessons. But other than all of that, thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all in another video. Bye!